Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits, and I've just recently had lunch at Mrs. Lovett's, although I did keep myself strictly to the salad menu. Well, thank you for coming back again to Musical Talk. For today we're going to be hearing the second part of that in-depth interview with the lovely John Gieves-Watson, formerly of the Temperance 7, the Bob Kerr Whoopee Band, and of course, more recently, the Bill Posters Wilby Band, who retired after 31 glorious, if chaotic, years last year at Christmas 2014. Last week we heard about John's early years, how he discovered the banjo, and how a love of art and creativity had taken him into the Temperance 7. Now the Temperance 7, just to recap, was a British 1950s, 1960s trad jazz band, very much riding on the crest of the trad revival that was occurring at that stage, but which didn't just play music professionally, although they did do that, but they also introduced comedy, light-hearted moments, and what we were discussing last week as le visuel, where they very clearly sent up what they were doing and did everything with their tongues firmly in their cheeks. Hard to do if you're the trumpet player, of course. In this week's episode, John will tell us about the last days of the Temperance 7, certainly in its original formation, which came to an end in the late 1960s, although a group with that name still exists and does very much the same kind of thing. And then we'll hear how John transferred into the even more, and I do use the word advisedly, zany Bob Kerr's Whoopee Band, before eventually ending up in the Bill Posters Wilby Band in the 1980s, which, as I say, continued right up until last year. I found John to be a fabulously good storyteller, and the things he's done in his life are quite amazing. And of course, although in retirement, he still comes out occasionally to perform, so if you ever get the chance, do make sure that you catch him. So, as they used to say, and I'm sorry I'll read that again, without further ado, and rather a lot of nothing, let's hear the rest of that conversation with John Gieves-Watson. Musical Talk. Well, John, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me again about your illustrious career, and I don't use that ironically. I think it is a genuinely great career in entertainment and music. We were talking last week about your period in the Temperance 7, which really spans about 1959 to about 1969, and you touched upon the fact that you'd made a record with George Martin, which had gone to number one, which is You're Driving Me Crazy. What does it feel like to have a number one record at such a youthful age? Had that ever been on your plans for life?
Well, no. I mean, it wasn't the plans of the band. I mean, we were as surprised as anybody, really, that it happened. We were invited to go on to Jukebox Jury.
With the late, great David Jacobs?
Yes.
And perform live? Or
and
be the
we were the artiste in the back room.
Fantastic.
That was, listening to the comments, and they were favourable. But then when they showed us, of course, we dressed up in our frock coats, morning coats, whatever, and the guys were there smoking the big cigars. And then at the end, the signature tune, remember, it was da 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 da. So we played it on phonofiddles, about 3 or 4 phonofiddles, and banjo and sousaphone.
Fantastic.
And that coming on the television, I think people, it was a good record. That just the next day just went crazy.
Indeed, you did drive. We're driving the public crazy, as it were.
Yeah.
And that really, a number one is an amazing thing. I think that was 1961.
Yeah.
But that wasn't your only assault on the charts, was it?
Well, no, because we followed that up with Home in Pasadena. Got to number 3, I think it was number 3. But it stayed in the charts quite a long time. But that is the one that people remember for some strange reason, because they remember the verse, which went, "Oh, you railway station, oh, you Pullman train," which they just remember that. They remember the train song.
Is that how it's popularly reminded to you?
Yeah.
Yes.
When people come up now and say, "Oh, I remember it," it went something like, something about a railway station.
Because one of your songs has one of the songs from the Temperance 7 has a false ending as well, doesn't it?
Well, that was Home in Pasadena.
Indeed, and I've heard many a presenter on the radio get caught up on that. Was that a deliberate thing to... Is that part of your playfulness, I suppose?
I think it was part of the playfulness. I can't claim that it was my idea. It was something that came out of the arrangement we did. In fact, we recorded that twice. We recorded it without the ending originally,
yes,
and it started to go up the charts. By then, we had a better version, which was the one with the key change going up and the false endings.
Yes.
So
which is now the one that's popularly remembered.
Yes,
really,
it's the one that's remembered, but there are some copies out there which were the original that was released, but I don't know where they are. I actually think they might be quite valuable, those. Anybody's got one, I'll have it.
The question I must ask then is that being a group originally for Temperance 7, when you joined originally, was mostly live music. You've been performing, you were seen, but it was a live band. Suddenly you're starting to get recordings. From recordings, a large number of albums are recorded. You have quite a large discography as a group for that period. Did that present you with any difficulties? Is there something innately strange about recasting jazz numbers, whether they be orchestrated or not, into head orchestrations, casting them into a record so they become solidified? Or is that just not something you would think about?
Well, it was a mix of our old numbers, and then we had a musical arranger, Cliff Bevan, who was classically trained, and he did write a lot of the parts for things, later numbers that we did, Charleston, Black Bottom, those numbers we were doing. They were not so much head arrangements as fully arranged.
The Black Bottom is, I must say, just on a personal level, is one of the songs I remember from my youth. I had it as a record as a boy, and I loved it. So, and not because of the rude word "bottom," of course, which is not, which it does excite 7-year-olds. But I must say, I probably need to thank you for my very existence, which is not something I get to say to many people, because in anticipation of this conversation with you, I'd mentioned it to my father, and my father told me that he used to take my mother courting to Temperance 7 gigs.
Oh.
At exactly the right time, if that makes sense. He has a particular memory of one in Chelmsford, I think it is. And it must have gone well because they married each other and I'm here. So my thanks to you very strongly, if I may say. I'm your greatest fan, partly because...
Oh, well, okay, I'm to blame. Oh, dear.
Yes, he told me that with a great gleam in his eye.
Oh, well, give him my condolences.
Yes, I will. So, but can I ask another thing about the albums? And this is something that I know that performers in the Ted Heath band, a very different kind of band, although occasionally with comedy interludes, certainly following on perhaps more broadly, but in a similar tradition in some sense. But I remember hearing that the people who performed in the Ted Heath band used to become a little irritated because Ted Heath would insist that they always played their songs in live shows as they had been on the record, because people said that's what they know and that's what they want. Whereas, of course, if you're playing jazz in whatever form, you want to be more free with what you're doing. Was that ever something... Was that a tension that you ever found for the Temperance 7?
Not at all, no.
You were happy to go off-piste on the live shows as well?
Yes, I mean, we'd always play... I mean, Home in Pasadena became our signature tune, so we'd always start with that, but we'd sometimes just start with a short version of it. And the other thing that we'd always finish with would be the Government British News.
To finish with that, because in a way you think that's a heralding piece of music.
No, we'd always finish with that one.
Which fits very nicely in with that kind of sort of hello, this is the hello Empire, this is Britain kind of thing, isn't it?
Very much that. Yes.
Ties in with the kind of characters. I'd like to pick you up now, if I may briefly, on some biographical notes on the back of one of your albums from this period, which mentions, just in passing, having family who were involved in lighthouses and family involved in the music hall. Or certainly in the profession of show business, shall we say, at least.
Well, those anecdotes... Brian Innes was very clever at inventing a persona for each member of the band. And it was like Captain Cephas Howarth of Moss Brothers Second Hand, the Queen's First Foot and Moss Brothers Second Hand. And he was searching, for something for me. And I'd happened to mention that I had a relative who was keeper of the Eddystone Light, but in fact it turned out to be the Longships Light. And we had this incident when we were playing at a private function, and one of the London fogs came down.
Oh, yes.
And
the proverbial pea super.
Yeah,
yes.
pea super. And we'd gone in various cars and couldn't obviously drive back that night, too dangerous. So while they were looking for a hotel for us, we were in the lounge of this rather splendid establishment, the house. And one of the band, Cephas, had brought Alan Cooper a packet of dandelion coffee,
yes.
As one does, I suppose. But he thought this was an unusual thing, and he presented him with this. Anyway, I decided while we were sitting around to make us all some coffee. So I took this packet of coffee, went into the kitchens, brewed it up in the coffee pot and the family silver, taking a big liberty, I suppose. Put it all on a tray, the cups and the finest china, bone china, and the coffee cups and everything. Came in, and I'd been a waiter in my college holidays, so came in bearing this tray. And as I walked in the door, Alan Cooper said, here's Gieves with the coffee. And that from then on, that stuck. And I was then also related to Gieves were the gentlemen's outfitters
as in Gieves and Hawke.
As in Gieves and Hawkes. He was referring to that, but also it relates to Jeeves, the butler.
Yes, because Gieves is often pronounced Jeeves, isn't it?
Yes. So I was then labelled, a personal manservant.
Yes.
And to make things more ridiculous, I was personal manservant to the keeper of the Eddystone Light.
Which ties in with genuine understood genuine family tradition. Yes. Now, I think you said that before we were recording that your aunts and some of your relatives had show business claims, some not insignificant.
Well, I had two aunts who were both dancers, and one in particular was the first captain of the first Bluebell troupe in Paris.
A famous dance troupe.
Very famous, and they toured the world.
Yes, there's nowhere else to go after that, is there?
No, they were, yes, and she knew she had left me her photograph collection. And I've got signed photographs of, my aunt was called Priss from Josephine Baker, to Priss from Maurice Chevalier.
The great people performing in France.
All those great people who were in the 30s performing on the French stage, in the shows that the Bluebell Girls were in. There was another one who was a showgirl. Her basic job was to carry across the board with the name of the next act.
Oh, I see.
She married a Johnny Cullen, who was one of a double act comedians, and he later became a theatre manager when he retired from the stage, and he was theatre manager in Lincoln, Theatre Royal Lincoln, and also the Empire Theatre in York, which was a variety theatre. And I used to go and stay on holidays with them. And first of all, I'd taken my Punch and Judy show to show Uncle Johnny, get his opinion, professional opinion. He loved it, of course, and gave me great encouragement.
Which is good.
And 13 or 14, I was allowed to see the show, first half only. The twice nightly they were running the first show, but these were the early nude reviews.
Which people might know best from the sort of the Windmill and the film that told that story recently.
Yes, and so you would get these new tableaus of these girls not moving, but in between, of course, you'd get all the variety acts.
Yes,
you'd get the jugglers and the comedians, and all these things. So I used to love these shows, not only the girls, but what else was going on.
From soup to nuts, as they say. It'd be wrong to say that you came from a show business family, though, wouldn't it? So you weren't. Do you remember as a young man, as a boy, really thinking, "Oh, show business is what I want to do"? Or because it seems almost, when you look at it, like a proper progression from beginning to end. But there's also that sense that you've been good at what you've done, and therefore it's led to something else, and led to something else, and led to something else. And so, do you see design, or do you see luck?
Oh, it's pure luck. Pure luck is being in the right place at the right time, especially with the Temperance 7. Never set out to be in that band. It was just that I was on the spot when they needed somebody.
And not playing the trombone as you'd originally planned. Because you wouldn't have got it then, would you?
No, I wouldn't have got that. No, it's just one thing has led to another. There's never been any great master plan.
So before we leave the Temperance 7, however, I think it would be fair to say that the Temperance 7 didn't just give you an opportunity to assault the charts and doing live shows, but you ended up making a few films. Inserts, perhaps, but you were in that's Trad Jazz, which I don't mind telling you is the clip with you in is featured all over YouTube, and anyone who wants to see it can do so. A very, very young John is there, if I may say, but looking immaculate, that's the thing. But you were saying earlier, you were talking about everyone being in a circle around a microphone for the recordings. What's clever is you're also using I think it was directed by Richard Lester.
Yes.
A great Beatles director, of course, taking that connection in again. But you're doing interesting things as a group. You're sitting in a straight line, but then every now and then the camera angle will change, and then you're sitting in a circle. So it's visually interesting whilst being static. It's a very odd mixture of one and the other.
Well, that was Richard Lester's homage to the films in the 30s, the Busby Berkeley movies.
Yes, the great dance
where he would do a shot from an aerial shot of the dancers below making patterns. So I'm sure that was his influence on that. I mean, we were playing music of that period, so he keyed into that and had us doing these the shapes that Busby Berkeley had used.
Because yes, there's also a sort of split screen kind of mirror thing going on as well, which when you see people sort of emerging from it playing various instruments does make curious kaleidoscopic sort of imagery.
Yeah, well, that was Alan Cooper, yes. Yeah, well, it was just... and then, of course, he had, again, one of these sort of gold digger type films.
Good 30 staple there.
He had the camera disappearing down Paul McDowell's megaphone, and then you're going into a whirling image. And that, again, was... that I'm sure I'd seen that in the these gold digger films of 1933 or whatever.
And I think you appeared in another jazz film.
Well, there was one called Take Me Over.
Might have been that.
Which was not shown very much. I think only at the BFI, to tell the truth.
Merely to the elite, then.
Because I think there was something about the family, the director died and the family didn't want it released. There was some strange story about it. The story was that some buildings were going to be pulled down, and they wanted to save a cafe, and we were the band playing in the back room of the cafe, and so this has developed into he decides to open a nightclub, and we eventually, I think, the film, we save the cafe and the night and the club that everybody goes to.
I am pleased. And of course, your last film, but this is a film that people may very well have seen, which is The Wrong Box by Robert Louis Stevenson, which was turned into one of those sort of epic comedies where everybody was sort of crammed into it. And the Temperance 7 are playing in a park on a bandstand, I think.
Well, yes, it was rather odd casting, really, because we're the military band, and of course we were playing a sort of. It was written by one of the band, Cliff Bevan again, playing a military number, and I was given. There's no banjos in a military band,
not obviously.
So
no.
I was given a pair of cymbals to crash, and we were recording. It was recorded live. So
it wasn't piped in. You weren't miming to it.
No,
you were doing it properly.
we were actually recording live, and of course I had a problem with the cymbals playing live. I couldn't crash these cymbals together, so I asked for 2 giant pieces of Sorbo rubber to be put between them.
Oh, they're
to muffle it.
Cymbal mutes.
Yes, and if you carefully, you can look carefully. You can actually see one of them, but. that didn't matter. But we did have Peter Sellers come along, taking a whole load of photographs of us while we were playing.
Because you already had form with him, hadn't you, with Ukulele
He wasn't
Lady?
in the film, but he was a great friend of the director.
And the music from that, on the whole, for the most part, is of course by John Barry. And you, just by chance, you mentioned that you covered John Barry when you were doing Jukebox Jury, so because he wrote the theme tune for Jukebox Jury.
Oh, did he?
Yes.
Oh, right.
So,
yes, of course. Oh, yes. Yes, I remember now.
I mentioned it in last week's episode because I don't think you actually said that you had any connection with her, but you were in a film with Cicely Courtnidge, and this is the film. She plays the sort of the matriarch of the Salvation Army, who turns up right at the very final scene in the park, which is also where your bandstand is. So it's a jolly film for spotting people, if I may say.
Yes, it's one of those Lovies films, isn't it?
I think it is. But it's about 1967, and you sort of left. Well, did you leave the Temperance 7, or did it come to a natural end? I know there's a Temperance 7 now, but it's a different kettle of fish, isn't it?
It did come to a natural end. We weren't getting enough to carry on the band, offer people full time with the band. Yeah. Brian Innes and myself had started an agency. We were getting in. We were with the Harold Davison. We'd left Sidney Lipton, and we were with the Harold Davison agency. And this was useful for me because they found out I was a graphic designer, and I got to do all the posters and programs. Brian was writing the texts. Oh no, he didn't. Sorry. It was Benny Green was writing the text.
As in the great Radio 2 presenter and
he was
historian
writing
of
the
music.
text. Yes, he was writing the text for the programmes, and I was putting them together for printing and designing posters for Duke Ellington, Fletcher Henderson.
The very people
Howard
you
James.
so loved.
Yeah, absolutely. And when Duke Ellington came over and they did their concert, we were invited to go as a band, and we sat in the audience, and the Duke very kindly acknowledges us in the audience and got us all to stand up.
How wonderful.
Yeah, that was quite a moment, that.
I find that absolutely stunning. But also how wonderful to be involved, as you say, in that sort of the paperwork area of that, because producing those programmes, those are collector's items for many, many people, and about the people you so admire.
Well, it was useful for me because when we did the weeks away in the northern clubs and the gambling casinos, the day was free. We were just working in the evening. So I would take all this work up, programs, and work out what I was going to do to paste up. And I'd say to the landlady, "Do you mind if I work on the kitchen table?" And would do the layouts of the programs.
Did you liaise with Benny Green personally, or did the text come to you and then?
No, I had to liaise with Benny Green. Yeah.
And what was that like? Because he had a vast knowledge of the same kind of music you were interested in.
Well, he was very affable, and I used to edit his work, and he never seemed to mind.
So the Temperance 7 sort of came to a natural end at the end of the 1960s, which in a way almost feels... This sounds a dreadful thing to say, but it feels almost right, because it feels very much a product of the 50s and 60s. And that sensibility was sort of disappearing into the 70s. When you think at the same time you've got glam rock turning up, it does seem that there might be a bit of a mismatch there. But you weren't away from producing and performing, performing and producing music very long at all, were you?
Well, no, because three things happened. The Temperance 7 finished. And in the last couple of gigs that we did with the Temperance 7, we had to get a depth trumpet player in because Cephas had gone back to the BBC designing sets. That was his job. Bob Kerr came in and played trumpet. And also that time, the Bonzo Dog Band were splitting up, going in their different ways, and Vernon Dudley Bohay Noel and Sam Spoons both left. And Sam had met up with Biff Harrison, and they had a little act going called the Magic Drum Kit or something, Monster Drum Kit. And Bob Kerr gathered these itinerant vagabonds together to form the Whoopee Band. And we started out, initially I wasn't with them, but they'd been playing for a few months, and then Vernon went on holiday, and Bob Kerr asked me if I would dep for him, and I did that for a couple of gigs, and of course, I was introducing some of the things I've been doing with the Temperance 7.
Yes, of course.
And then Bob said, "Oh, well, you better join," when Vernon came back. So that became quite a phenomenon, because one of the first bands to have started up music at the Half Moon in Putney. And we used to do, was it Wednesday night? Every week. And the place would be absolutely packed.
A residency, essentially.
A residency, yeah. And it would be really, and then we did also the Golden Lion in Fulham. And then we got television. Bob Godfrey, who was well known for cartoons.
Rhubarb and Custard.
Absolutely.
And Henry's Cat. I'm a product of his cartoon world, I must say.
Well, he'd been to see the band and he loved it, and he got a film crew, and we did it actually in the Half Moon, this little film, and it actually went out on release as a sort of second feature.
This is a live action film rather than an animation.
This was a live action, but
right.
he put in some of his visual gags in with it, visual cartoon things, and it just so happened that just before that I had an attack of jaundice, and I was looking rather deathly in it, but there you are, managed to get through it.
It's the curse of colour, isn't it?
So, and then we were picked up to do, I think it was television, because they wanted a link. Kenny Everett had just started his television. I think, was it ITV?
It was ITV's video cassette, I think it was called, when it first started.
That's right. And he wanted a break. He was good. And so they wanted to keep his name in front of the public, because he would become a big sensation. So it was our show, but Kenny Everett kind of introduced it.
Oh, really? Almost like a cabaret.
Really, yes. So it still kept Kenny Everett in there. So we did these shows, and unfortunately, they seem to have disappeared. We don't seem to have any of those.
Oh, the archive's been wiped, is it?
Yeah.
Off and away, I'm afraid.
But we also did quite a bit on the continent. In German television, French television, Spanish television, Danish television. So we toured quite a bit, and some of that has survived, and there's quite a bit of that on YouTube recently surfaced. The French stuff, which was done in a sort of circus ring.
Which takes us back to what we were saying last week about le visual. That how would you describe, if asked, how did the Whoopee Band sort of differ or continue but enhance what the Temperance 7 were doing? Because I think it had a stronger comedy bent, didn't it?
Well, much so. I mean, we were getting to more towards the almost doing little playlets. There was one number that Vernon Dudley used to do. The Shot and Shell, and we'd actually act this out and actually construct a tent on stage and all get in it, and it was all chaotic. I mean, that was the joy of the band. It was totally total chaos, really. But the music was holding. The music was good, and it held it all together. And then people did came out and did their various party pieces.
And were you producing lots of those yourself? Your prop making skills still very much to the fore, I think.
Well, yes, I can't remember what I introduced now, because the line between the Whoopee Band and the Bill Posters is getting a bit blurred these years.
Well, am I not right in thinking that this is about the time you were starting to make life-size mannequins in order to dance with?
Well, that came from the Temperance 7.
Oh, did it?
Yes.
Oh, earlier than I thought.
Yes, I'm sure it was. Oh, maybe not. Anyway, yes, there was one memorable occasion when we were appearing in Germany, the opening of a bank in Dortmund.
A bank opening?
Yes. And they constructed a temporary stage at one end of this vast marble hall with some very strong lighting. And I'd made this full-size dummy, life-size dummy, in a 20s dress with a 20s hairstyle. I'd adapted a dressmaker's dummy for this, and the legs were tied to my feet, and I would sort of, the idea was I'd dance in front of the band doing sort of Charleston with
Yes.
this. You know.
Another
Anyway,
touch of visual in a banjo. Yes.
Well, yes, and anyway, for this particular thing, the lights shining in your eyes when I got on the stage. I didn't know where the edge of the stage was, and I went straight over the edge, catching my ribs on the way down. Managed to get up, took a bow, and the audience thought it was great,
Yes.
part of the act. And I disappeared in the back room where the dressing room was, and managed to get this dummy off and throw it in a corner, and it landed with all legs and arms and legs akimbo, in an impossible position. And I lay down on this high back bench, and I said to the roadie, I said, look, I think I've broken a rib. I thought I had. I was in a lot of pain. So they sent for the ambulance, and these two guys eventually arrived with a stretcher, came running into the room and saw the dummy, stopped, their faces went white, and they thought they'd got to deal with this terribly deformed thing on the floor, until I said, hello, no, that's me. You want? And so I was carted off for x-rays. So and then the next day I couldn't move.
No, it sounds awful, actually.
Couldn't move. So they left me in the hotel, and I couldn't speak German, and the hoteliers couldn't speak English, so I had no food or drink all day. And anyway, Biff and Frank came by train to pick me up, because the other boys were driving there by the band bus, which happened to be a converted ambulance.
Oh, did it now?
They came to collect me, and we went off by train to the next gig, which I managed to do. The band was extremely late getting there, because they'd been held up at the border, and there were just the three of us with no instruments, having to face this rather angrily German jazz audience. But
yes, but lack of instruments must not have been a help there.
no. So anyway, they eventually did arrive, and the audience had stayed for hours afterwards until it did get there. So that was the incident of the collapsing dancer.
But it must be said, the way you're describing this, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you spoke at the beginning about being a performer, and not a performer, an entertainer before being a musician, and you've got the dancing sequence, and I know from later shows that you've got tap under your belt, as it were. You can tap. There's a lot of physicality in this in your career over the time, which seems to have got more and more, actually. I'm quite impressed by that. It's not a sedate job sitting playing the banjo. It seems to be a job of physical. It's like a workout almost, exactly. And you're changing costumes and getting the next props ready and putting the old props away and setting things up and putting them down, all at the same time, creating music as well. It seems amazing.
Well, it is. It was an exhausting. Yes, it's an exhausting show, but you've got the adrenaline running, and you just get on with it, and you're carried along. You're carried along by the enthusiasm of the rest of the guys. I mean, I'm not the only one. I mean, Sam Spoons is very energetic. He's always jumping up and down and jumping on tops of tables, playing his spoons and things. It is a very physical thing, and that's one of the reasons now. Now I'm getting past my sell-by date. That I've had to, really got to slow down. It was getting too much.
And is that why you finished with the Whoopee band? Because that you did a sort of another 10 years with them, essentially, didn't you, I think?
Well, yes. No, the Whoopee band finished because, with me, because they were going abroad so much, and I was doing quite well with the graphic design business. I was doing a lot of packaging for sweets and various other companies, and I just couldn't take the time away, so I left. And then the same thing happened to the other guys, and they were finding it difficult, and eventually the band, they left the band. That was the four I mentioned earlier, Sam, Biff, Hugh Crozier and Jim Chambers, and they set out to form a new band, which they came up with the idea of calling it Bill Poster's Wilby Band, and I was asked to join and I said, well, I don't really want to join another band, I'm too busy, but I'll help you out.
And you did, didn't you?
I did it for 31 years. I helped out.
For the life of that band, because that band has now retired and is moving on to its next stage, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, tell me about Bill Posters, because Bill Posters is when I sort of joined the story, in the sense that it's the group I first saw you in performing in its sort of later career. A few personality changes, but still essentially the band you've described, I think. Did it have... what did it want to do? Did it have a particular stance, or was it just, let's do more of this, we enjoy this?
Oh, very much the latter, yes. I mean, we wanted to carry on the spirit of the Whoopee Band, really, and do the same thing, a mix of music and comedy. We found that it entertained people, and people liked it, and we enjoyed it. And that's what we all enjoyed doing, so we carried on doing that, yes.
I've got to ask you, we were speaking about, during your Temperance 7 days, how you sort of became known as the Gieves of the Eddystone Lighthouse, if you like, the butler. But you're the only person I know who sort of revels in two nicknames, because anyone who's been to a Bill Poster's gig will know that you're known as Evil John Gieves-Watson. How did that less than charming epithet get attached to your name, which you play up to, of course?
Well, yes. I mean, quite by accident, really, because it was Biff was standing next to me for something, and I accidentally knocked him over or hit him, and he fell over, and of course, I played up to that,
yes.
and as if I'd done it deliberately, and did the villain's, because I had a moustache, I did the old Victorian villain moustache twirl, and everybody hissed and booed, and that was it. I think Sam shouted out "evil,"
and everyone else did too.
So that's it. That stuck from then on.
That's been a nice little leitmotif as well, isn't it? Because even in your creativity, you've been able to do something like that. So one of the regular items that the Bill Posters always plays is Teddy Bear's Picnic. And it's a tradition that people have a sort of little teddy bear that they've got. Jim Chambers has got a series of 1970s or 1980s airport tie-in teddy bears, Gary Gatwick and Archie Aberdeen and people like that. And everyone shows their little teddy bear, and the audience are encouraged to bring a teddy bear to wave back. But you have an animal which would fit in with the evil persona. Is that fair?
Yes, it's a bat.
Yes. Another creative prop again, isn't
it?
A
vampire bat.
But he doesn't just sit there, he flies. You make him move.
Yes, he flies. He flies. He's back to the puppet days. He's a hand puppet, and I make him fly, and then and he's very difficult to catch, of course.
And forgive me for asking as well, the way you're described, the instrument you're principally known for in the Bill Posters is the big banjo. And I use that term advisedly because it is a big banjo. Most people wouldn't really know what a big banjo is. I am one of those people, apart from having seen it.
Well,
what's the difference?
Well,
don't just say it's bigger.
There isn't a difference, except when I was back to the Temperance 7 days, I had quite an ordinary banjo and got into the Temperance 7, and I used to like to go on Saturday mornings down to Notting Hill, the Notting Hill antiques and
Portobello Road kind of thing.
Portobello Road, exactly. And it was late one afternoon, and I walked past this store, and I saw this magnificent banjo hanging up, and I inquired the price, and I could afford it, but I didn't have the money on me.
No.
And I thought, I've got to have that. So I rushed back to my digs, and fortunately I was in rooms then, still at college, and fortunately there was somebody else there, and I managed to borrow £20 off them, rushed back, and just as the man was closing, I bought this banjo, and it really was quite a splendid instrument, and played that for many years with the Temperance 7. It had a kind of cello head to it, all carved in wood. But when I was playing with the Whoopee Band, later on, we were playing at the Bieber Rooms in Kensington, and there was a band on, an unknown band, a second band, Black Sabbath.
Oh, in the days when they were unknown.
In the days when they were unknown.
Gosh.
Anyway, we were on first and they were finishing up. We had a roadie in those days, so he used to take all the instruments and things. Because I think I was on the bus or something, I don't think. I'd left my banjo for him to take, and then he rang me up next morning and he said, "Did you take your banjo with you?" He said, "Because when I picked up the case, there was nothing in it."
Oh, really?
So that was it. The banjo had gone. So we don't know where that banjo went. We'll say no more.
But it left you banjo-less.
So, yes. So when I was in the Temperance, I had publicity pictures taken of me with this banjo. So I went round all the music shops in central London with this. And I said, "Look, if this banjo appears, it's this. Please contact me." Anyway, the last...
It's so distinctive the way you described it. Yeah.
Yes. So the last place I got to was John Alvey Turner, who was a well-known banjo player and had a well-known banjo shop in Tottenham Court Road, and I showed him, and it said John Gieves-Watson, the Temperance 7, and he looked at it and he said, "Chap in the Temperance 7 plays a banjo like that." I said, "Yeah, that's me. It's got my name on the bottom." It just focused in on the banjo. And he said, "Oh, well, I've got one like that." I said, "It's mine." And he said, "Well, unfortunately, I promised it to somebody and they're supposed to pick it up on Friday." He said, "I'll tell you what they do." He said, "If they don't pick it up on Friday, it's yours."
Oh,
so
right, okay.
I went around on Friday. The guy hadn't picked it up, or whoever wanted it, so I bought it. But it was set up as a cello banjo, which is in the violin family.
Yes.
You have banjo bands, and you have the same range of instruments, really.
Oh, I see. Yes.
As the violin set, you have the tenor banjo, the plectrum banjo, the cello banjo, the bass banjo. So this was a cello banjo and should be tuned as a cello, but I converted it. It was the same string length, nut length as a normal plectrum banjo, which I've been playing. So I converted it to that, and that's the one that I play now.
So it's a beautiful looking thing. It's all quite metallic as well. Or so it appears to me. Maybe that's the lighting in the venues when I've seen you, but it's...
Well, it's a metal body, and I had a resonator back made for it, which is probably what you've seen is a concave brass back.
Maybe that's what it is.
Which throws the sound out. Again, back to Strovil's. And
yes, and focusing the sound, isn't it?
Focusing the sound forward, yeah.
And there's so many... there isn't time in the world to go through all the lovely little bits and pieces that happen when you go to a Bill Posters band, but a gig. But I love your music stand, which is a pair of legs in a morning suit. So it makes it look like when you're sitting behind it, if you're a member of the audience, it looks like you're standing up playing your instrument, when in fact you're sitting down behind it with your music.
Well, that again goes back to the Temperance 7 and
is
this Le Visuel. Because there was one gag I made was it was a violin player, and I had a string, and I copied an old Victorian engraving of this violinist with his check trousers on. And I made it so that he, with the string, one arm was movable, and it looked as though he was actually bowing. So I can't remember what number we played that in, and also I had his master's voice dog that I pulled on with a string, so the dog came to listen to him. So this was just a little, visual interlude. So when I joined the band, I needed a music stand because I can't remember arrangements and chords. I just drift off, and I've got to have them in front of me. So I converted that the legs into a music stand, and that's where the legs came from.
But it looks fantastic. It's a very striking musical stand. It's fantastic. like to concentrate a bit on the choice of music. Now, Bill Posters plays a wide range of music, but a lot of them are these sort of they're good jazz standards, and there's a lot of novelty numbers from the 1920s as well. And you do it several sort of solo pieces. Is it something that you just, as a group, agree that my little repertoire is this, my little repertoire is that, and everyone has a go at doing what they want, or do you sort of all get together occasionally and say, right, we need to change the set a bit, or how does it create its sort of repertoire?
Well, I mean, if you're we were 18 years at the Bull's Head.
Which is your most recent residency there,
yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
And you don't want to be playing the same numbers every time people come. So you try and, think of new things. You might play the same thing for years and years and years. And if people, if you don't play them, and they are popular, like Sam and Biff do Little Sir Echo,
yes.
People say, whoa, you didn't do Little Sir Echo, they complain. But of course you also want to try and introduce new things. So individually we've all come up with our own ideas for numbers and then introduce them.
Most recently you've been singing that rather splendid song, which I think a lot of people will think of as a Spike Milligan number, but previously is in fact actually a 30s, 20s hit, Fruit, Eat More Fruit.
Yes.
The Raspberry Song.
The Raspberry Song is the correct title of it.
And you come on wearing this wonderful hat. Bigger even than your banjo.
Well, it's a song about a costermonger from the East End, and so try to dress up and look a bit like a costermonger.
Yes, it's Gus Elan from the music hall, but a little bit bigger, isn't it?
That's right, exactly. Yes. And I'd heard the song when I was in the Temperance 7, and always wanted to do it, and then quite by accident, when we had Rod Slater was in the band and playing the bass saxophone, and for some reason I'd remembered the words, and I suddenly started to sing them, and he joined in.
Oh, he knew it,
and he kind of knew it, and so for a long time we did it as a bass saxophone and voice.
That would have been an interesting...
Yes, it was. Then, of course, Rod left, and, we've had a couple of pianists in. So it's always been, accompanied by piano since then. But that's how it started. It was just sort of playing about in the dressing room one day. That's how that one happened.
And it's this idea, isn't it, that you heard something you like, you squirrel it away until a point comes when you can do it.
It's the same with my latest number I did, which I've always wanted to do for years and years and years, which is Singing in the Bathtub.
Which you've made into an epic, if I may say.
Well, it took a long time in gestation, that number.
It's astounding. So if anyone knows the song originally, it's most associated with Gracie Fields in this country.
I'd seen it with Teddy Bunn.
Oh, right.
The xylophone
yes.
player, originally. And heard it with that and loved it as a number, and thought, what can I do with this? And then came up with the idea of when my I realised my tap dancing days were getting a little shorter, shall we say? Yes. I realised I needed a substitute, so I made my lady friend helped me make some mannequins and dress them, which were about a quarter body size, and they hang around my neck. But I can manipulate the feet as if I'm doing a little tap dance.
So basically, what people see is your face on a sort of a 2-foot-high doll's body. Would you describe it, sort of mannequin?
Yes,
that's for look, isn't it? Which is immediately funny, anyway.
Yes. And so I sing the number. And then the band play it. It's a lovely tune anyway. Then there's a little interlude, and then Singing in the Bathtub. Of course, I come out and I've just been in the bathtub, and with naked body and with towel.
And bath cap, which you're wearing on your real head, of course.
And bath cap. So, and then at the end there is the reveal, shall we say.
It's interesting how the audience always responds to it, even the simple stuff, because you come on, first of all, and as you say, you sing the first verse. And you're singing, so your face is there and people see the face, and you've got this sort of, as you say, the dressed body dancing beneath it, but it's a very subtle dance. At first you just tap a foot at first, and then there's a little kind of sort of soft shuffle, and people suddenly realise that it's not just your head, which is but you're manipulating the whole body, and it's a whole body piece. Your timing is impeccable on it, actually, because you sort of build it up to this massive climax, whilst also giving the orchestra a chance to do the instrumental break in the middle while you change.
Thank you very much. But there again, going back to the old, I'd seen that with an old film of one of these sort of seaside Piero groups.
Oh, a concert party kind of thing.
A concert party. That had been an act in a concert party that I'd seen somewhere on film years and years ago. So there's nothing new.
But, everything old is new again. But you do it. I've never seen anything like that done better.
They didn't do the naked bit. That was me.
So, go on, please.
Yes, but I've always liked to give a twist to what people might think is going to happen. Do Top Hat.
Which is the Fred Astaire.
The Fred Astaire number, Top Hat. But because I used to do a little bit of magic, and I had a walking cane, you get into the number, and then suddenly the walking cane is on its own; it's floating. So I'm tap dancing, and so it's a magic act and tap dancing together,
which is unusual.
I've never seen anybody else do that. And then the other number I've done is we did Somewhere in Sahara. And I coming on at the end, and I've got the cloth, and the usual magic act is the floating ball that comes over the cloth. And
yes, of course, yes.
Yes, and I did it originally with that, and then in a junk shop I saw this little dog's head, so I thought, how wonderful to have a floating dog's head instead of the steel ball. So that became that. And,
something that no one else is doing, you can be honest.
Yes.
Actually, you also do a nice line in Snake Charming as well, which is always very funny.
Oh, that one, yes. Well, we were that is a whoopee band number, and we used to do that at the Golden Lion in Fulham, and there was a girl came up. I'll explain the routine is that it's the snake charmer with the snake charming basket, and I play the snake, the pipe, and up comes rather than a snake, an umbrella.
Yes. At first, people think, "Oh, it looks like a snake," because they can only see the handle, of course. But then it becomes.
So, but what was funny one day was that this girl said, "I've got a real snake."
Gosh.
And she said, "I'm wearing it." And she had this snake round her middle.
And it was a live snake?
She used to go out with this snake round her. Yeah, big python thing.
Good Lord.
So she said it'd be great if the snake came out the basket. So I met up with her and rehearsed with this snake. And decided to do it at the Golden Lion one night. And of course, same routine. Yeah. The snake is in the basket, and it had been out in the cold, so it was docile. But then the evening wore up, was warming up. Anyway, did the routine with the flute, and people started to laugh because it's the umbrella gag. Up comes a real python. You could have heard a pin drop.
Oh, really?
Oh, everybody just.
Yes. This isn't just different, it's frightening. Yes.
Well, they couldn't cope with that one. They couldn't. Then I pushed the snake back in the basket, took it off. So that was, I don't know whether that was successful or not. But,
it's nice to bring the changes, though.
Yes, yeah.
But the Bill posters lasted 31 years. And you were in your temporary position, remained with them. But all good things sort of must come to an end. So how did it sort of come to an end? Was it? I've got to ask, because there was a period where your residency couldn't take place because they were refurbishing the venue itself, and that seemed to go on for a very long time.
Well, yes, it did, and they did refurbish, but the stage was not suitable. We couldn't have got on the stage that they'd originally put up. And then they eventually came back to me and said, look, we've rebuilt the stage, and do you want to do a show? And it was just at the time then that we were doing a show in Henfield, and Jim Chambers had not been well for some time, and he announced that he didn't feel that he could do the travelling anymore and was going to, leave the band, resign. And I'd been under pressure for quite some time with organising it and the stress of not knowing who was going to turn up, whatever. So I said, well, if Jim's out, I'm out. It was that really, and he was such a big part of the going way back to the Whoopee Band. I mean, 50 years, maybe 40. No, yeah, 40, over 40 years we'd been in bands together. So I thought, no, it's time to close that door. I think close that chapter. Not close the door.
Yes.
No, not close the door at all, but close that chapter.
So we were saying at the beginning that you wanted to be an entertainer. You succeeded in spades with that. You've been able to mix making music with producing props, and your creative side on a practical level has also really fed into your musical side, and vice versa. You've been able to do that. You're a man who bristles with enthusiasms and passions and skills and talents, and more than anything else, creativity. So, as you say, this particular avenue is temporarily closed. But you're not a man who would sit down, I don't think. So how do you keep that sort of creative drive ticking over?
Well, I've got an art school training. I was 7 years at art school. Was going to be an illustrator, moved on to being graphic designer, and a few years ago I joined the local art society, who were very friendly, a lot of amateur artists, and they got me onto the committee because of my various skills with designing and
yes.
handling a website.
You're a man to know, I think.
And so every fortnight in the winter it might be we have an indoor event. We get some models in, or we have a demonstration, or still lifes, various themes. And in the summer we go out every fortnight to some location, painting. It's a nice social thing. You say I've always creating. I need a push.
Oh, do you?
I do need a push. Like the band was always a push to get things done, and the art society is a push to get things done as well. It says you've got to be there at that time in that place, and you'll do something. That seems to be how it works these days, because I'm getting quite lazy.
Oh. Well, if you want something done, ask a busy man, they always say, don't they?
But I seem to be very busy. I'm very busy. Yes, and I also have kept on graphic design, and I organise print for a company, and that keeps me ticking over as well. And there's always, odd things to do. I've got quite a sizable garden. There's also that's coming up. There's all the hedges. There's a lot of hedges.
Yeah, spring looming.
There's a lot of hedges to cut in this place. So I should be busy.
But that urge to entertain, that and to you, if you take your career as being the beginning of the Temperance 7, which is 1959, and I know you've done before that, that's still 54 years producing and entertaining people, producing fun and enjoyment. Do you think you can turn your back on that completely, or do you think you'll always be the occasional? No, let's ask John to do something. Oh, I'll be delighted.
Yeah, well, that's happening. I'm going to guest with a couple of other bands and just do bits and pieces with them. Yeah, but I don't want the commitment.
Yeah, it's the regular, isn't it?
I don't want the commitment. I'll turn up and do the odd thing here or there, and the reunion show or whatever. But no, I don't want the commitment and the stress of organising it.
Well, if I may say, as I said earlier, you've been instrumental in my parents getting together, so that in itself is something. Mm-hmm. But also, I've just enjoyed immensely watching you perform over the last few years. You've brought me so much personal pleasure, and it's been a delight talking to you.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
John,
Very kind.
may I say that although I may not get to see you perform so much with the giant banjo, I look forward to seeing you maybe at the Royal Academy of Arts summer exhibition or with your other artistic skills.
Oh, we shall see. We shall see.
John, whatever you decide to do, may I thank you again, and all power to your elbow.
Thank you.
Musical talk. John Gieves-Watson there, a man of immense talent and immense generosity in speaking to me for so long about his fantastic career. And if you're interested in seeing something of that kind of music, very firmly not just in that British tradition of sending up popular song from the 1920s and beyond, but also a direct descendant of the groups that we've been talking about, then you can, because although the Bill Posters Will Be Band is no more, some of its remaining members have joined up with some of the remaining members of the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band to form a group known as Bonzo Bill. So go online to see if you can find some of their gigs. And, as John said in that interview, if you want to see him in his heyday, in the late 1960s, early 70s, there's footage of him just released on YouTube of some of his work with the Bob Kerr Whoopee Band. And I think his description of chaotic but fun is absolutely what you see on those. They are well worth catching. And amongst other things, you'll get to see John's marvellous Snake Charmer umbrella sketch. My thanks to John for giving me so much of his time and so much of his history in conversation. I'm pleased to say that we've met up several times since, and he continues to be as interesting off the record as on. Well, that brings this week's episode of Musical Talk, I think, to a shuddering end. Although that shuddering could, of course, just be due to an electrical thunderstorm that's going on in the distance. Which means it's probably time for me to take off the special metal helmet I always wear when I'm recording these episodes. Anyway, for the time being, let me say goodbye. Here's me doing so. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk, edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2015. And don't forget to follow us on those exciting modern social networks. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do so at Musical Talk Thos.
And also that time, the Bonzo Dog Band were splitting up, going in their different ways, and Vernon Dudley Boho Noel. Vernon Dudley Boho.
That's easy for you to say.
It is when I've got the lozenge in my mouth. Vernon Dudley Bohe Noel